getting down. I'm John, man.
Everyone is waiting on a streamlined revolution to get this on to a place where there's one simple solution. Or no coincidence that bliss and ignorance walk hand in hand. And the revolutionists and the anarchists can agree on common politics or decide which side of this city will burn down tonight.
Well, the experimental series began from just wanting to try to change things around here, do something a little different, push boundaries, and do something more innovative and interesting. And since we live in this global culture now where everybody's got access to everybody else's ideas, it seems relevant to try to do something new, something innovative. Is that making sense? More than half of our set is improvised, meaning we just make it up as we go along. And again, that's something I've always found to be the most interesting stuff. Like, because you take risks, something honest tends to manifest. And since you're not thinking about the outcome and you're reacting to what's going on around you, it tends to have great results when it works. When it doesn't work, it can be pretty awful. But our lineup is expanding and changing all the time. And I'd like to think that what we're doing is somewhat evolutionary because we're trying to mix up different genres in a situation where like everything's right there, so you might as well try something different. And it doesn't always work, but when it works, the results seem to be more compelling.
Jeffrey from Lagong? Yeah, that guy surprises me. He looks like this European like comic book character, you know, with the cigarettes and the perfect stubble, and he's just like, it's kind of weird, you know. He's like almost like film noir guy or whatever. And I had no idea that he played music for a while, just a real understated guy. And I went and saw the show at the Ivy House one time, and he was just by himself on the guitar, and I thought it was a full band down there, but it was just him, and he had like all these loops going, and it was just like, I was like stoned out of my mind, and I was kind of drunk, and I was like, walked down the hill, and just like, I actually sat on the stage and just like stared at him for like 20 minutes or so while he finished up his set, or whatever the fuck it was. But it was amazing. Like, it just really like was able to capture like the beauty of like the hill and the St. John's Bridge, and like everything that was behind her, like the moon was out. It was like, you couldn't have scripted a better video. And like literally before I came down around the hill, like I thought it was a full band playing down there, but it was just Jeff. He grabs sounds from like the universe and then puts them through his amp, and we get to hear it. I don't know. I dig it.
The rhythm at times could be hard to follow, you know, and I think for people who aren't musicians probably have a harder time understanding it or really being able to follow it, you know, just like the overall composition of the songs, you know, it's like everything's a bit off and you have to really break it down to understand it, and I think a lot of people just don't want to do that at times.
Everybody's trying to get at what's inside and bring it out through their tools. You know, that's what the art's about. They make you curious, or you know, they bring up feelings sometimes, and you try to mess with it, and you get ideas from what you just heard, and you try to do more things, and these are the experiments.
experimental music, I have found, has always been babe, we're recording right now. This is live. See, those experimental kids don't like me. There's a reason I haven't played No Fest yet.
There's a reason they don't like Paul Simon either.
Stop doing drugs, learn an instrument.
But at the end of the day, it's just kind of like you feel it or you don't. There's really no middle ground, or there's no place to be like without an opinion. You either hate it and you think it's the most ridiculous, stupidest, immature thing in the world, or you think it's somehow profound and it's different and you're like excited about some of this stuff. Want me to keep talking? I can. I mean, what do? You know, you're like, oh, I'm a spokesperson for experimental music. I mean, what kind of bullshit is that anyways? I'm like, oh, I represent something now.
I haven't eaten his food. I've tasted his wonderful coffee and his gelato. That wasabi gelato is the shit.
Yeah, the wasabi is kind of an interesting angle because it's not that many people want to get a whole scoop, but everybody wants to try it. That's the metaphor I was looking for. You're making something that people aren't going to buy, but everybody just wants a little taste of it because it makes them chuckle or guffaw or chortle or whatever. Chortle? And then they say to themselves, that was interesting. Trying to not limit it to just like, you know, people that just like twist knobs and just go, you know, or people that just are like, you know, with electronics. I like people that do, you know, finger picking with the guitar, you know, instrumental musics. A lot of it has kind of like a sacred tone to it. A lot of classical music from overseas and shamanistic music is, you could call it improvised or experimental. So people are trying to maybe transform themselves. I mean, psychedelic by definition means a transformation of one's consciousness, so maybe I think of psychedelic music and experimental music as sort of in the same zone. Experimental music, or experimental by its nature, is something that really you can't define. Pushes boundaries. It's something that like it exists in the moment, so there's a lot of improvisation going on. You react to the stimulus of your environment, all that heady stuff. This is experimental to me, Nutella. But it's really nice to provide a venue space for people to do it because there's really hardly anywhere to do it anymore. There used to be more in Portland, and things pop up and go away, but all the shows here are free. If I charged a cover, it would be kind of ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I could get some Kino machines in here and I could probably do a lot better as a business model, but I think of like house shows and things like that where like they never seem to last. They always are here and gone in a year. So I guess selling products is one way to like to continue to utilize a public space for, you know, the good of the culture at large. So when you do something that's unorthodox or not traditional, there's always going to be some kind of, you know, heavy reaction to it. Whenever you shake up people's value systems, it tends to create a new sort of matrix of understanding, as it were. And I guess that's how the organisms and stuff change and become more complicated organisms. It seems to me it's like a very natural process. So to consider it even something brand new, that's, like I said, I'm not some kind of scholar, but it's just like when people first started banging their bones together or hitting trees, they were probably doing the same thing. It was just reacting to their environment. And humans are like these language excreting, you know, sort of creative machines anyways. So they have to just like express. Sometimes you need to do some kind of hardcore noise set to react to something horrible, as opposed to always doing something that's like pleasant. But then again, people have this different idea of what pleasant means based upon what they can interpret as beautiful. In Indian music, they have more notes than they have in Western music. And so we have to adapt to even figure out if we even think it's beautiful or not. So you have to kind of learn how to expand your embrace of what you think is beautiful. So if someone sees somebody twiddling a knob and just can't get anything out of it, I mean, that's all well and good, but it's just a limitation. I don't really like Justin Bieber that much, but that's just like, that's my problem, you know what I mean? I can't relate. Certain kind of challenging art was done in a political sense too. Like the Surrealist movement was very big on shocking people and, like, you know, kind of turning what was considered normal art upside down, because they didn't really like the commodification of it, because they thought that you couldn't put something in a museum and say and charge people money for it and tell them that that's beautiful. Maybe in a few years people will be like, you know, amputating themselves on stage. We'll see. I'd like to see a woman giving birth. Nah, I don't know.
A lot of times it depends on the moment, how it turned out, you know. Sometimes it really can affect you and have a, you know, an impact. And other times it can fall flat, you know.
I play the flatula. It's a woodwind instrument that you play with your colon.
You know, I think it's cool when people get off the beaten path in any way, shape, or form, for sure. Like, there's enough people doing music one way, or two or three ways, that everybody kind of sticks with. Not everybody. Muscle Beach comes to mind. I've seen him play a bunch of times, and like, yeah, they're pretty crazy. They actually got kicked out of the No one show. Boober put a microphone up his ass, like in the middle of a song, and pulled it out and kept singing. There was actual like fecal matter dripping off the microphone, and like he was like putting his hand in it and like making designs and stuff. And then the bartender like unplugged them and told him to get the fuck out.
That's not true.
Yeah, it's all true.
Oh yeah, G.G. Allen used to do that shit all the time, man. He used to shove the mic in his ass and swing it around and fling shit at the crowd. And he'd piss right off the stage into people's mouths and shit, man. They loved it. Like, people went nuts for it.
That's why I think hand washing is very important, especially for an artist like myself who works in the medium that I work in.
The medium?
The medium of shit.
There's just some really horrible experimental music out there. Like, just like crazy. What? I got 2020 over here.